What is your favorite unsolved historical mystery? Story 1. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston has issued a statement that they would double the long-standing reward for the return of artworks, worth up to $500 million, stolen from their premises back in 1990. They are now offering a $10 million reward. This is the latest chapter in an epic saga of the biggest art theft in history. 13 major works of art were lifted from the museum in 1990. 27 years after the heist, the artwork and crooks have still to be found. Story 2. There is an abandoned city in Africa that was very advanced. I cannot remember the name, but it had bathing areas and toilets. What makes it weird is that it was not destroyed by Arabs or Europeans. Why was it abandoned? Update. It was Gedi. Gedi also boasted very large homes as well. They had aqueducts, which brought them water from wells. Also, all of their plumbing was connected to a sewage system. Yes, they had a sewage system. Seriously, why was it abandoned? Civilization is harder to maintain in warmer climates near the equator. There is a book whose name I have forgotten about the Dutch settling Africa and how they did a great job in South Africa, but as they moved north, they eventually had to abandon their attempts. Not sure if Gedi falls into that category, but I would imagine if it relied heavily on water, like most civilizations do. Depending on how old the city is, when the desert encroached on Kenya, all those sewers and aqueducts and plumbing became impossible to continue. Story 3. Where is the General Grant? The short story is a ship carrying millions of dollars worth of gold was sunk in a storm near Auckland Islands in the Southern Ocean of New Zealand in 1868. People survived the shipwreck and knew exactly where she went down. In a large cave they tried to shelter the ship in, but as of yet, no one has ever found her location. Even with the ocean currents and swells, she shouldn't have moved too far from her initial resting place yet. All these years later, no one can locate her or her cargo. Story 4. I love historic unsolved mysteries. Here's a few that I always find interesting to read about. The Hinterkaifeck murders. Hinterkaifeck was a farm in Germany. The maid thought it was haunted because she kept hearing sounds, so she quit. The owner noticed footprints leading into the farm building, but not leading out. A new maid arrives. Neighbors become concerned that no one has seen the family in a while and go to check it out. They find the animals well taken care of, but someone had murdered the entire family and the new maid on the day she arrived and then lived in the farm with the bodies for a while. Marie Celeste is a famous ghost ship. It set sail with everything in order and then was found at sea, intact with all of the cargo, etc. But the crew and the lifeboat were gone. The Phantom Whistler. A woman was stalked for years by someone who would whistle. Ireland's crown jewels. Someone managed to steal the crown jewels of Ireland. Mother missing in Paris. A woman checks into a hotel with her mother. Mother gets sick. Hotel doctor sends woman out to get medicine. Woman comes back and mom is gone. The room is different. Everyone denies that the mother was ever there. This happened in the 1800s or early 1900s. Missing lighthouse keepers. 3 lighthouse keepers disappear from a lighthouse on an island off the coast of Scotland. Left bizarre clues behind. Story 5. The Bronze Age collapsed. Sometime around 1200 BCE, almost every city in the eastern Mediterranean from Troy to Gaza, as well as on the Greek mainland and Cyprus, was violently destroyed or abandoned. Both the Mycenaean, early Greeks, and Hittite empires collapsed completely, along with an entire branch of the Egyptian Empire. Evidence points towards numerous attacks by sea peoples, but we have no idea where they originated, other than, the sea, or why they suddenly attacked en masse when they did. The destroyed regions were not conquered or resettled as far as we can tell. Textual evidence from the time feels almost apocalyptic. From a tablet written by a Hittite king, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. Does not my father know that all my troops and chariots are in the land of Hatti, and all my ships are in the land of Luca? Thus the country is abandoned to itself. May my father know it. The 7 ships of the enemy that came here inflicted much damage upon us." Story 6. I was always intrigued by the Jimmy Hoffa disappearance. I think it's weirdly fascinating when anyone goes missing without any trace. I also remember growing up with everyone knowing that he was buried at Giants Stadium. So that plays into the allure for me. I know Mythbusters found no trace of human remains and nothing was discovered when they tore the stadium down, but it's hard to not connect Hoffa to Giant Stadium. It seems like one of those cases where a lot of people know something, but no one is saying anything. Story 7. The Antikythera device. I can't link on mobile, so don't know if that worked, but a basic rundown is. A device was found on a wrecked ship near Greece that dates back to about 150 BC. It was discovered to be an analog computer used to measure planetary positions, an orrery. The technology alone is hundreds of years ahead of what was thought possible for the time. It was constructed using techniques that were not seen again until the 14th century, not to mention the fact that it measures the paths of planets that wouldn't be rediscovered for hundreds of years. It's so out of place in time that it would be the equivalent of opening up a medieval tomb and finding a laptop. Story 8. What humanity really spent 200,000 years doing. Modern humans are 200,000 to 300,000 years old, meaning if you got in a time machine and went back 200,000 years, the people you would meet would be physically identical to today's people. And they had the same brains, the same intelligence, the same creativity as today's people. If you brought one of their babies forwards to the modern era and raised it, it would be putting funny cat pictures on Tumblr, like everybody else. Civilization, as we know it, is only about 5,000 years old. The oldest tools and items we know about are only about 10,000 years old. So, what the fudge happened for at least 190,000 years? These weren't stupid cavemen. These people were us. Do we really think they spent all that time unclothed running from tigers? There had to have been more. There have been ice ages since then that scraped entire mountain ranges off the face of the earth, so any actual evidence would have been ground into dust. Story 9. Look into missing 411. It's seriously creepy stuff, man. Hundreds of people have disappeared since the 70s, always near water, commonly in or near national parks. Search dogs never catch their scents. Some bodies are never found, and the ones that are usually turned up in areas that had previously been searched. The one FBI agent that kept appearing to investigate these cases ended himself. The scary thing is, all these disappearances are documented and proven. Story 10. The Bronze Age collapsed. That is, the oldest world ended utterly. So completely that Greeks going around figured the ruins were so massive, it took monsters to build them. Only one surviving was Egypt. If you can imagine the U.S. surviving World War III at the power and industrialization of Cuba. Educated guesses are famines displaced obscene numbers of northern invaders and possibly steppe nomads, but the records just call them sea peoples. Some of them are mentioned as the legendary giants in the Bible called Nephilim, which meant something like fallen. One of my favorite theories involving the sea peoples is that the cities were never conquered or resettled because the sea peoples never came with armies and never intended to actually collapse entire empires. The sea peoples were pirates, possibly even a multi-ethnic group like the Woku in Japan and Korea. They attacked the Mycenaeans, Egyptians, and the Hittites in search of the three W's: wealth, wine, and women. Story 11 depends on how recently you want to call it historical, but the Tybee Island broken arrow definitely ranks up there in my book. Short of the story, in 1958, a nuclear bomber had an accident, and according to regulations, the pilot dumped the nuclear bomb in the waters off Tybee Island in Georgia. They didn't want to risk it detonating if or when the plane crashed, but then they couldn't find it. It's been nearly 60 years, and despite one fake satire news site claiming it had been found, it never has been. Somewhere out there, just off the coast of Georgia, is a nuclear bomb sitting in shallow water, becoming more unstable each passing year. Story 12. When I visited my parents in New York a few years ago, we went to an acquaintance of my father's house to go swimming. The owner is a multimillionaire or billionaire, I forget which, but anyway, this is one of his many houses, and he doesn't actually live there or even stay there too often. Lots of acreage is maintained well with horses and whatnot. While we were there, we did not go inside, as it was locked and we were not given keys, just permission to use the pool. My dad told me that the house used to be owned by a different family, also very wealthy. Very wealthy, and apparently kept all their money hidden in the home somewhere. He told me that the daughter of the family that lived there, along with her boyfriend, tied up the rest of her family in the basement and tortured them all to death, trying to get the father to tell them where the money was hidden. They were not successful, but ended her entire family: mother, father, and I believe two younger siblings. They were both arrested and I believe are both still in prison. So, the mystery part is, of course, about the money. It was never found, supposedly. The house was abandoned for a while, I believe, and my dad said a contractor bought it, tore the whole thing down by himself, money in the walls, and rebuilt the home, which we were then visiting. He never reported officially nor unofficially finding the money, though that seems like the most likely outcome. Story 13, not really historical, it's actually quite recent. Cicada 3301. Basically, Cicada 3301 is an extremely mysterious cyber organization recruiting the best of the best. With no method of contact, no relevant details beyond the fact that they were looking to recruit exceptionally smart people, they posted an insanely difficult cryptography-based challenge and trial that had the world's top cryptographers and computer engineers baffled. The test was so insanely difficult that even NSA cryptographers said that they would be incapable of crafting such a complex puzzle, let alone solving it. If I remember correctly, one man got close to solving it but didn't make their deadline and did an interview about it. He mentioned that he was working on it 24/7, and it cost him a ton of money. And if he had started 2 weeks earlier, he would have made the deadline. At the time, there were communities of people working together to solve it, but still, people think there were less than 5 people who completed the puzzle, and none of them went public about it. It's not confirmed whether anybody actually completed the puzzle or not. The public information about the test is only limited. Much of the test was only solved by private individuals, and not the public communities working together. The puzzle included clues left at various locations around the planet, so the mysterious organization has many international connections. There have been many, many more mimics of this, but none come close to the difficulty of the original puzzle. And every cicada, 3,301 beyond the original, is believed to be a fake. Story 14, The Princes in the Tower. I hesitate to call it my favorite because it mostly annoys me that it's unsolved. Sometime in the 17th century, they were renovating the Tower of London and found the skeletal remains of two children buried near the White Tower. It was assumed at the time that these were the nephews of Richard III, who Shakespeare famously wrote were murdered by their uncle in order that Richard might become king. There are several things that cast doubt on this story. Among them is that Richard was already king at the time of their disappearance, and that history is written by the victor, which, in this case, was the Lancastrians, who would have wanted to vilify the Yorkists in every possible way to quell sympathies. When archaeologists discovered the remains of Richard III in a car park in 2012, this mystery could have been put to rest by determining if the bodies found were actually the nephews of Richard III. But due to some stupid, antiquated ideas about it being improper to perform scientific tests on royal remains, they weren't allowed to test the remains of the children, so we still don't know. Story 15, last Saturday morning, two guys knocked on my door. I was skeptical that they were trying to sell me solar or Jesus, but they were some kind of historians interested in light artillery and a gun that is in the RI State House. Apparently, a guy from my town was ended in Pickett's charge while manning that gun and was buried at Gettysburg. They have a letter that says his brother went to Gettysburg and dug him up and returned him to the family farm, which is my house. They asked if they could come back with ground-penetrating radar to look for the grave, and they're pretty darn sure it's here. So, I guess this is my most interesting unsolved mystery. Story 16, Who Assassinated JonBenet Ramsey? As a law student and pageant girl, I am naturally obsessed with this case. Obsessed. Every time I try to clear my mind of it, something sucks me right back into it. I've spent countless hours examining the police report, testimonies of everyone involved, the behaviors of each suspect, and every little circumstance surrounding the case, just trying to come up with an answer. I have a couple of theories, but every time I think I have an answer, I go back to the case and something always makes me question and second guess myself. And so my entire obsessive cycle of researching begins again. Story 17, The Tamam Shud Case, also known as the Somerton Man. One day in a beach of southern Australia, a dead man shows up with all his organs full of blood. They find the phrase Tamam Shud on a scrap of paper in his pocket, which I think is Turkish for something like finished, done, or ended. They also find a book in a nearby car, can't remember, and it has on one of the last pages a bit of paper ripped out. and it matches up with the scrap in his pocket. It goes on until they find this woman whose number was in the book and she might have ended him. I can't explain it fully. I suggest you do some research on it. Story 18. Ooh, man. I'm struggling to remember the guy's name, but it was the quadruple, I think, murder that occurred around 1950-ish. It was a family of 4 and a grandma who lived right outside of D.C. The father was a diplomat, didn't receive an expected promotion, which more than likely tipped him over the edge. He came home, murdered his wife, 2 children, and his own mom, put all their bodies in his car, and drove down close to Jacksonville, North Carolina, where he then dug a hole, threw their bodies in, and burned them. He fled and hasn't been found since. But I've seen an episode of that new John Walsh show that covers murders, blanking on the name of that, too. And I think in the show they said he may have been spotted overseas at some point. Gets me every time. Story 19. My grandfather told me a cool one about our city that would be cool to investigate and probably not hard to solve. When he was a kid and a paperboy, he delivered what would be considered a mansion back then. Now, this house is in a Spanish style, which looks very odd considering in this part of the city, it's all old Victorian houses, and would be very expensive to build. Well, anyway, one day delivering the papers, they invite him in this place to decked out to the nines in German stuff, displayed an SS uniform, medals the whole 9 yards. Obviously, this guy was a high-ranking German who managed to flee. It was fun to know who this guy actually was. Another one is the oldest church in the city, which had switched roles several times, including a prison. The tale is it was used in the Underground Railway, and there was a hidden tunnel somewhere in the building. Many attempts have been made to find it, but no one has been successful. Story 20, Marshall Ney. Guy was a high-ranking French general under Napoleon, who then switched allegiances to the monarchy after Napoleon was exiled. He switched back to Napoleon upon his return, but when Napoleon was defeated, he was tried for treason and supposedly executed. The theory is that the soldiers intentionally missed, and he managed to escape to South Carolina and spent his life as a high school teacher. French visitors said there was a man who neared striking resemblance to him. His coffin has never been opened, which would settle it. The theory is far-fetched, but it's fun. Story 21, What Happened to Roanoke Colony? When John Smith arrived back at the colony after 3 years of being gone, he found it deserted with the name Croatoan carved into a tree, leading people to believe they were either attacked and ended by the Croatoans, no bodies were found, or they merged with Croatoans because they were having too hard of a time surviving on their own. Their dwellings had been dismantled, so it didn't appear they left in a hurry. There have been archaeological digs in the area where the Croatoans lived, and they unearthed items belonging to Europeans. But since the colonists had established okay relations with the Indians, they could have traded. Then there's the whole thing with the Dare stones. Eleanor Dare was the daughter of John Smith, and stones were found in the late 30s, early 40s with engravings on them with her name. Some believe she was marking their course. Many believe they are a hoax. Recent investigation decided the first one found could have been authentic, and the others are forgeries made with a drill press. Story 22. Mine's probably only of interest to myself and my family. But what exactly my great-granddad did during the war? I knew he was a member of the Royal Engineers and that he took a few pictures. What I can't figure out is why he would end up coming face-to-face with French resistance, an Me-262 jet fighter, and coming face-to-face with the female guards at Belsen. All pictures he took. Sadly, he isn't around anymore and would never talk about his war. I'm hoping that his unit war diaries might explain all this, but no joy so far. More so, I have yet to locate any members of his unit, despite several attempts to find some. Story 23, The Murder of Danny Casolaro, an American freelance writer who came to public attention in 1991 when he was found dead in a bathtub in room 517 of the Sheraton Hotel in Martinsburg, West Virginia, with his wrists slashed 10 to 12 times. He was supposedly uncovering a grand government conspiracy, which he named the Octopus. He was in Martinsburg to meet a source about the octopus. This conspiracy theory is supported by other conspiracy theories, notably the Inslaw case. Super interesting. I didn't tell nearly the whole thing, so look it up. Story 24. There's a really freaky one in a book of unsolved mysteries I read. Basically, the guy goes through all the mysteries and debunks them, but he couldn't work out this one. There was a large family tomb on an island in the West Indies, possibly Jamaica. The coffins were huge, heavy stone things. The first person was interred, and then a few years later, another family member died and was interred. When the tomb was opened, the coffin had been knocked over and the lid removed. They fixed it up and added the next family member. Next time, the same thing happened, over several interments. Each time they opened the tomb, they found the heavy coffins knocked over by some enormous force. There had been no earthquakes and no one had access. I looked it up, but I can't find it, otherwise I'd give more details. There's more to this story, very creepy. Story 25. This is a great thread, in particular because of the mysteries that get even weirder the deeper we look into them. I haven't seen it on here yet, so I'll add it. The story of the ancient city Pumapunku in western Bolivia. This place shouldn't exist. The official explanation is, in 500 AD, this city of enormous granite blocks, up to 130 tons each, were brought from a quarry 56 miles to 13,000 feet, above treeline in the Andes, cut and drilled with laser precision, accomplished by a people at chisel-level technology via tree rollers. I'm no archaeologist, but calling BS on that.